Lucas Carter had grown used to a life defined by simplicity and struggle. His days were a blur of grease-stained hands and long hours at the small auto garage he managed on the edge of town. He never complained, though. Every sacrifice was worth it for his daughter, Emma. At 8 years old, Emma was the light in his world, her smile the only reward he ever needed. Since losing his wife years earlier, Lucas had poured every ounce of himself into raising Emma with kindness and resilience, determined that she would never feel the emptiness of what they had lost. Their little house was modest, their meals simple, but there was laughter and love in every corner, and that made Lucas prouder than any paycheck ever could. It was on a gray, rainy afternoon that fate decided to alter the course of their quiet lives. Lucas had been tightening bolts beneath the hood of an old pickup truck when he realized the yard had grown too quiet. Emma, who usually played with chalk on the driveway, was nowhere to be seen. Panic rose in his chest as he dropped his wrench and hurried to the street, calling her name. His heart thudded in his ears until he spotted her small figure standing at the grand iron gates of a mansion just a few blocks away. Emma's curly hair was damp from the drizzle, and in her tiny hand she clutched a rose she had plucked from the mansion's manicured garden. Before Lucas could reach her, the tall front doors opened, and Isabella Hawthorne stepped out. Known across the city as the untouchable heiress of the Hawthorne Empire, Isabella was a woman of pristine reputation and chilling elegance. Her life was made of glittering parties, high-stakes deals, and the suffocating expectations of her wealthy lineage. Yet beneath the tailored gowns and diamond necklaces, she carried a loneliness few ever noticed. Isabella's cold gaze swept over the little girl at her gate, her lips parting to issue the scolding that had been trained into her since childhood. No one trespassed on the Hawthorne estate without consequence. But then Emma tilted her head, her big brown eyes brimming with innocence, and stretched out the rose with both hands. "I wanted to give you this," she said softly, her voice trembling with shyness yet warm with sincerity. Isabella froze. The words seemed to pierce through the icy shell she had built around herself. For as long as she could remember, everyone who approached her wanted something: her money, her connections, her name. No one had ever given her something as simple, as pure, as a flower with no strings attached. She felt her throat tighten, her carefully composed facade cracking for the briefest moment. By then, Lucas had reached them, breathless from worry. "Emma," he said, gently but firmly taking her hand. "You can't wander off like that." His eyes then lifted to Isabella, expecting disdain or anger. Instead, he was surprised to find her staring at his daughter as though the child had awakened something long buried. That was the moment their worlds, one of humble sacrifice, the other of unimaginable wealth, quietly collided. Neither Lucas nor Isabella realized it yet, but a single rose had just planted the seed of a story that would change all their lives forever. The days following Emma's innocent gift to Isabella felt strangely different. Lucas had expected never to cross paths with the heiress again, convinced she would brush off the moment as beneath her. Yet, one morning, a sleek black car rolled up to his modest garage, its polished surface a sharp contrast to the battered vehicles usually parked there. When Isabella Hawthorne stepped out, dressed in understated elegance instead of her usual grandeur, Lucas felt his guard instantly rise. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed, yet her eyes darted curiously around the cluttered garage as though it was a place she had never dared to enter. "My car needs servicing," she said simply, though Lucas suspected it was less about the car and more about curiosity. Lucas accepted the keys with professional courtesy, treating her no differently than any other customer. He wiped his hands on a rag and asked questions about the vehicle without sparing her the indulgent charm she was likely used to. If Isabella noticed, she didn't show it, but deep inside, she found herself oddly unsettled. Men had always tried to impress her, to flatter her, to seek her favor. Lucas did none of that. He was polite but distant, focused only on the work in front of him and the little girl coloring quietly in the corner. Emma, however, had no such restraint. She bounded up to Isabella with the fearless warmth only a child could possess. "Do you want to see my drawing?" she asked, holding up a page covered in messy but cheerful colors. Isabella crouched down, the hem of her tailored dress brushing against the dusty garage floor, and took the picture as though it were a priceless gift. "It's beautiful," she whispered, and for once, the words weren't part of any calculated response, they were real. That became the start of something unexpected. Isabella began stopping by more frequently, always with the excuse of checking on her car or needing some minor repair. Each time, she found herself drawn into Emma's little world of games, laughter, and unfiltered joy. Lucas, wary at first, watched from the sidelines. He saw how Emma's face lit up whenever Isabella arrived, how she insisted on showing her every new drawing, every small accomplishment. It worried him, this attachment. Isabella belonged to a world far removed from theirs, and when she inevitably retreated back into it, Emma would be left with yet another loss. Yet even Lucas couldn't deny the change he saw in Isabella. The woman once known for her aloofness now sat cross-legged on the living room floor, carefully coloring alongside Emma. She attended Emma's small school recital, clapping louder than anyone in the audience. And one evening, after Emma had fallen asleep with her head in Isabella's lap, Lucas caught a glimpse of the heiress's face softened by a tenderness she didn't seem to know she had. It was then Lucas realized what he feared most: Emma had chosen Isabella, not as a visitor or a friend, but as family. And while that thought terrified him, it also planted a question in his own heart that he could no longer ignore. The fragile bond that had been quietly forming among Lucas, Emma, and Isabella was soon put to the test. When Isabella invited them to a charity dinner hosted by her family, Lucas had been reluctant from the start. He didn't belong in glittering ballrooms filled with chandeliers and crystal glasses, he was a man whose life smelled of motor oil and laundry soap. But Emma's excitement at the idea of wearing a pretty dress and being with Isabella convinced him to go. So, on that evening, Lucas walked into a world of polished marble floors and gold-trimmed ceilings, holding Emma's small hand, while Isabella walked beside them in a gown that shimmered like moonlight. All around, wealthy men and women turned to stare, their whispers sharp enough to cut. From the moment they entered, Lucas felt the weight of judgment pressing down on him. Every sideways glance reminded him of the chasm that separated their worlds. But he held his head high for Emma's sake. Isabella, however, felt the tension more keenly than she expected. She was used to gossip, to envious murmurs, but this was different. This was ridicule aimed not at her but at the man and child who had slowly become her anchor. She wanted to protect them, but for once, words failed her. The evening might have passed quietly if not for Charles Whitmore, a longtime family associate who had always eyed Isabella as a prize to be claimed. He raised his glass and smirked across the table. "Isabella," he said loudly, making sure the crowd heard, "we admire your charitable spirit. Bringing a mechanic and his daughter to a gathering like this, truly noble of you." Laughter rippled around the table, cruel and mocking. Emma's little face flushed red, her small hand tightening around Lucas's. Lucas felt his blood boil, but instead of snapping, he reached for calm. Emma tugged gently at Isabella's gown and whispered in a voice only a few could hear, "Don't be sad. I choose you." The words were so simple, yet they carried a weight that silenced Isabella's heart. She looked down at the child who trusted her without condition, and for the first time, she felt ashamed of her silence. Before she could respond, Lucas's voice cut through the murmurs, calm yet firm, every word sharp as steel. "She chose me," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Not for my money, not for my name, because I have neither. She chose me because she sees me for who I am. Something you'll never understand." The ballroom went still. Forks hovered midair, conversations died, and even Charles's smug smile faltered. Isabella stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat, stunned by the strength and dignity in Lucas's words. In that moment, she realized that what connected them wasn't charity or pity, it was choice, love, and truth. But as applause did not follow, and the whispers started again, Isabella knew this storm was only beginning. The world would not easily accept what was unfolding between them, and she would soon have to decide whether she was strong enough to fight for it. The days after the charity dinner were a whirlwind of consequences. Newspapers and online tabloids were flooded with photographs of Isabella beside Lucas and Emma, each headline more cutting than the last. Heiress in scandalous company. Hawthorne legacy at risk. Mechanic caught playing Prince Charming. Isabella's father, Richard Hawthorne, wasted no time summoning her to his office. His voice thundered as he slammed the papers onto his mahogany desk. "You are a Hawthorne. Do you understand the shame you've brought upon this family?" His words echoed through the cold room, but Isabella, standing tall in her silk blouse and calm demeanor, didn't flinch. For once, she wasn't the obedient daughter bowing to his expectations. "No, father," she replied firmly. "I finally understand what it means to be human. They aren't shame, they're my family." Her defiance shook the foundation of the house she had grown up in. Richard tried to threaten her with disinheritance, with the loss of every luxury she had ever known, but Isabella's heart had already made its choice. Wealth, status, and reputation felt hollow compared to the warmth she found in a child's laughter and the quiet strength of a man who asked nothing from her. Walking out of her father's office that day, Isabella knew there would be no turning back. Meanwhile, Lucas wrestled with his own fears. He had never wanted to drag Emma into a world that judged them so harshly. He considered pulling away, convincing himself that Isabella deserved someone who could match her world and that Emma deserved safety, not scandal. But every time he looked at his daughter, he saw how much she had grown to love Isabella, how the woman's presence had filled a void neither of them had realized was so deep. One evening, when Emma curled up beside him and whispered, "Daddy, can Isabella be part of our family forever?" Lucas felt his heart shatter and heal all at once. The answer came at Emma's school recital a week later. The auditorium was buzzing with proud parents and flashing cameras, but Lucas's focus was only on his daughter standing nervously on stage. She sang her little heart out, her voice trembling but sweet, and when the applause filled the room, Emma's eyes searched the crowd. She didn't run to the flowers handed to her by teachers, nor did she rush toward the stage door. Instead, she darted straight into the arms of both Lucas and Isabella, pulling them close with the innocent certainty only a child could carry. "My family," she whispered, hugging them tightly. In that moment, Lucas no longer doubted. He looked at Isabella, the heiress who had once lived behind walls of wealth and loneliness, and saw not a stranger from another world, but the missing piece of theirs. Isabella, tears glistening in her eyes, realized that love had nothing to do with power or inheritance. It was about choice, the purest one she had ever made. She had chosen them, and they had chosen her. From that day forward, whispers and judgments no longer mattered. In the simplicity of a small home filled with laughter, they built a life richer than all the gold in the Hawthorne vaults. And though the world outside might never understand, within those walls, one truth stood unshakable: she had chosen love, and love had chosen her back.